under the scorching sun of ancient Mexico. Colossal stone pyramids pierce the heavens, their shadows cast upon blood-soaked altars. 1,000 drums thundered as warriors marched, and obsidian blades glimmered in the light. Here, civilizations rose from jungle and desert: the Maya, masters of time and stars, and the Aztecs, ruthless lords of sacrifice and empire. But behind their glory lies a darker tale of gods that demanded blood, of power that burned like fire, and of a conquest that shattered an entire world. This is the story of two mighty civilizations, how they reached the heights of human achievement, how they shaped the destiny of a continent, and how, in the span of a single lifetime, they were brought to their knees by steel, disease, and betrayal. From lost temples hidden beneath the jungle canopy to the heart of Tenochtitlán, we journey into the soul of Mesoamerica, where myth and history are carved in stone. Welcome to the untold story of the Maya and the Aztec. This is Historic Horizon TV. History: Dawn of Two Civilizations. Long before the rise of the Aztec Empire, the jungles and highlands of Mesoamerica cradled an ancient civilization whose knowledge would echo across centuries: the Maya. Around 2000 BCE, scattered farming villages emerged in the lowlands of what is now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. At first glance, they seemed simple communities of maize growers, but beneath the canopy of the rainforest, a silent revolution had begun. The Maya became architects of time, developing one of the most sophisticated calendar systems ever conceived. Their priests studied the heavens with astonishing precision, mapping eclipses, solstices, and planetary alignments centuries into the future. But their genius extended beyond astronomy. They carved entire cities out of the wilderness, raising massive temples, palaces, and plazas connected by stone causeways that snaked through dense jungles like veins of civilization itself. As the Maya thrived, another power began to stir in the Valley of Mexico, a civilization whose destiny would one day collide with the Spanish and change the continent forever. The Aztecs, or Mexica. They were latecomers to history, arriving in central Mexico around the 13th century CE as wandering nomads. Legend says they followed the prophecy of their god, Huitzilopochtli, seeking a sign: an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a serpent. Where they found it, they would build their city. That sign appeared on a small swampy island in Lake Texcoco, where, in 1325 CE, they founded Tenochtitlán, a city destined to become one of the greatest the world had ever seen. With its gleaming temples, floating gardens, and bustling markets, it would eventually rival any European capital. Yet, unlike the Maya, the Aztecs thrived not on knowledge alone, but on conquest, forging an empire through fear, alliances, and an unrelenting demand for human sacrifice. But the Maya and Aztec stories are not merely about cities and kings. They are tales of faith, of how entire worlds were shaped by gods as fierce as they were divine. For the Maya, deities ruled every aspect of existence: Itzamna, the god of creation; Chak, lord of rain and lightning; Kukulkan, the feathered serpent who linked earth and sky. To honor them, the Maya built towering pyramids aligned with celestial events, turning their cities into living calendars. Yet, despite their brilliance, the Maya world was never a unified empire. Dozens of rival city-states, Tikal, Palenque, Copan, Calakmul, clashed in endless cycles of war, diplomacy, and betrayal. Their rise and fall unfolded over centuries, their temples swallowed by the jungle, their mysteries left buried in time. In contrast, the Aztecs rose like a storm, consolidating power in less than 2 centuries. Through alliances with Texcoco and Tlacopan, they formed the Triple Alliance, a political and military pact that expanded their reach across the Valley of Mexico and beyond. Tribute flowed into Tenochtitlan in the form of gold, cacao, feathers, and captives destined for the sacrificial stone. But with dominance came resentment. Many neighboring peoples, subjugated and bled dry, waited for the moment to strike back, a moment that would arrive with the sails of Spanish galleons on the eastern horizon by the dawn of the 16th century. Two distinct worlds coexisted in Mesoamerica: the fragmented brilliance of the Maya and the terrifying grandeur of the Aztec Empire. Their cities glimmered with wealth and knowledge, yet shadows grew long over their achievements. Famine, rebellion, and omens of doom whispered through the streets of Tenochtitlan. Priests spoke of strange signs in the heavens, foretelling the arrival of strangers from across the sea. Neither the Maya nor the Aztecs could know it yet, but their worlds were on the edge of cataclysm, a collision with Europe that would rewrite history forever. Blood, pyramids, and the gods. In the heart of the Yucatan Peninsula, beneath the suffocating heat and tangled vines, the Maya sculpted cities that defied nature itself. Chichén Itzá, Uxmal, and Tikal rose like visions of another world, their towering pyramids carved with intricate glyphs that spoke the language of gods and kings. At Chichén Itzá, the great temple of Kukulcán stands as a monument to cosmic genius. During the equinox, sunlight dances across its steps, casting the illusion of a serpent descending from the heavens, a perfect union of architecture and astronomy. But behind this brilliance lay a darker reality. The Maya believed that the gods demanded blood to keep the universe in balance. Kings and warriors spilled their own lifeblood in sacred rites. While captives were sacrificed atop temples, their hearts offered to the sun. To the Maya, this was not cruelty, it was cosmic duty, the price of existence itself. Further west, in the Valley of Mexico, the Aztecs embraced this sacred violence on an unimaginable scale. At the heart of Tenochtitlan stood the Templo Mayor, a colossal twin pyramid dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, god of war and the sun, and Tlaloc, lord of rain and fertility. Here, thousands of captives were sacrificed each year, their blood flowing down the stone steps into the streets below. The Aztecs believed that without these offerings, the sun would falter, plunging the world into eternal darkness. But sacrifice was more than religion. It was power. Wars were waged not to destroy enemies, but to capture them alive for the altar. Known as the Flower Wars, these ritualized battles fed the empire's insatiable hunger for blood. Through this cycle of conquest and sacrifice, the Aztecs built an empire that both terrified and dominated Mesoamerica. Yet even in their brutality, the Aztecs forged a city unmatched in splendor. Tenochtitlan was a miracle of human ingenuity, a city built on water, with canals that shimmered under the sun, floating gardens called chinampas that transformed the lake into fertile farmland, and markets that astonished even seasoned European merchants. Spanish chroniclers would later write of streets so orderly and clean that they rivaled any in Europe, of palaces adorned with turquoise and obsidian, and of a population exceeding 200,000 souls, larger than London or Paris at the time. But beneath the gold and grandeur lay tension. The empire's very foundation rested on fear, and the tribute system that enriched Tenochtitlan also sowed seeds of rebellion among the subjugated peoples. The empire was mighty, but it was also fragile. Its enemies waited like jaguars in the dark. Meanwhile, the Maya world continued its complex dance of power and collapse. By the time the Aztecs reached their height, many of the great Maya cities had already fallen into ruin. Historians still debate why. Theories range from prolonged droughts and ecological exhaustion to endless cycles of war that drained their strength. But the Maya were never truly gone. In the highlands of Guatemala and the Yucatan, smaller kingdoms endured, carrying fragments of their ancient traditions into the coming storm. When the Spanish arrived, they would not face a unified Maya empire, but a mosaic of fiercely independent city-states, each with its own rivalries and grudges, a situation the conquerors would exploit with devastating precision. By the early 1500s, the stage was set for one of history's most dramatic collisions. Across the Atlantic, Europe was erupting into an age of exploration and conquest. Gold-hungry empires sailed into uncharted waters, armed with steel, gunpowder, and a sense of divine destiny. To the Aztecs and Maya, the strangers who stepped onto their shores seemed like beings from another world. To the Spanish, these were heathen empires ripe for conversion and plunder. Neither side could comprehend the other, and yet, within decades, one world would vanish almost entirely, consumed by fire, disease, and betrayal. The pyramids would stand, but the gods would fall. Conquest, betrayal, and the fall of empires. In 1519, a small fleet of 11 Spanish ships cut through the turquoise waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Carrying fewer than 600 men, but destiny weighed heavier than their steel. Hernán Cortés, a daring and ambitious conquistador, stepped onto the shores of Veracruz with a vision that bordered on madness to conquer the mighty Aztec Empire. He had no king's army, no reinforcements, only muskets, horses, and an unshakable belief in his fate. To secure his men's loyalty, he burned his ships, leaving no road back, only forward into the heart of an alien world. What awaited them was a land unlike any they had imagined, sprawling cities gleaming under the sun, pyramids that touched the clouds, and a people who believed that gods walked among them. And in the capital of Tenochtitlán, Emperor Moctezuma II ruled an empire of millions, unaware that his world was about to burn. When news of the Spaniards reached Moctezuma, fear rippled through his court. The Aztec emperor was a devout man, steeped in omens and prophecy. And among the most powerful was the legend of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god. According to ancient belief, Quetzalcoatl had promised to return from the east in the year CE Acatl, which, by fate or misfortune, was 1519, when Moctezuma heard that pale-skinned strangers had arrived from across the sea. He hesitated. Were these mortals, or gods returned to reclaim their throne? Cortés, ever the manipulator, exploited this fear masterfully. Through interpreters like La Malinche, a Nahua woman who became his ally and lover, he wove a web of diplomacy and deceit, forging alliances with Aztec enemies such as the Tlaxcalans, for the Aztecs had ruled through terror. Cortés found willing partners hungry for revenge. Every step deeper into the Valley of Mexico tightened his grip on an empire he had yet to conquer. On November 8, 1519, Cortés entered Tenochtitlan. For the Spaniards, it was like stepping into a dream. They gazed upon a city of white temples, endless causeways, and floating gardens, a jewel glimmering upon the waters of Lake Texcoco. Yet beneath the splendor lay tension. Moctezuma welcomed Cortés into his palace, offering gifts of gold and jade, but every gesture carried suspicion. To the Aztec nobles, these strangers were dangerous. To the priests, they were blasphemers. For months, Cortés lived as both guest and prisoner, studying the empire's weaknesses. Then came the breaking point. In Moctezuma's absence, Spanish soldiers massacred hundreds of Aztec nobles during a religious festival, their bodies piled beneath the temple steps. What followed was chaos. Tenochtitlan erupted in rebellion, and the Spaniards, trapped and outnumbered, faced annihilation. The night of June 30, 1520, to be remembered in Aztec history as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. Cortés and his men attempted a desperate escape under the cover of darkness, carrying stolen gold and treasures across the causeways. But the Aztec warriors descended upon them like jaguars, their obsidian blades slicing through steel and flesh. Alike, hundreds of Spaniards drowned beneath the weight of their plunder, their screams lost in the lake's black waters. Cortés survived, but his army was broken. Yet the Aztec victory would prove short-lived. Fate carried a deadlier weapon than any sword: smallpox. The disease arrived with the Spaniards and spread like fire through Tenochtitlán, killing tens of thousands, including warriors, nobles, and even Moctezuma himself. As the empire staggered beneath the weight of death, Cortés returned, this time with thousands of Tlaxcalan allies and a single, merciless goal: to destroy the Aztec world. On August 13, 1521, after months of brutal siege, Tenochtitlan fell. The once great city, a wonder that rivaled Rome, lay in ruins. Its canals choked with corpses, its temples aflame, its streets painted with blood. The empire of the Mexica was no more. In its place, the Spanish erected Mexico City, the crown jewel of their new colonial dominion. The fall of Tenochtitlan marked the death of an age, but the Maya would not surrender so easily. For decades, the Spanish waged relentless campaigns through the jungles of the Yucatan, burning cities, enslaving survivors, and crushing resistance. Yet some Maya kingdoms held out until 1697, when the last independent Maya city, Tenochtitlan, finally fell. With it, the ancient civilizations of Mesoamerica were consigned to memory. Their gods silenced, their knowledge scattered, and their pyramids swallowed by time. But their legacy endures, carved into stone, written in glyphs, and whispered in the ruins where the jungle breathes their names. Culture, language of the gods, myths of creation. In the silent ruins of forgotten cities, beneath the tangled roots of ancient ceiba trees, the voices of the Maya and Aztecs still whisper through carved stone and faded murals. Language was more than communication. It was sacred power, a bridge between mortals and gods. The Maya wrote their history, astronomy, and myths in an intricate system of hieroglyphs, symbols, so complex that it took modern scholars centuries to unlock their secrets. Each glyph carried layers of meaning. A single sign could represent a sound, an idea, or even an entire story. Through these symbols, they preserved the Popol Vuh, sacred book recounting the Maya creation myth, where gods shaped the first humans. Not from clay or stone, but from maize, the very lifeblood of Mesoamerica. To the Maya, maize was not just food. It was identity, existence, and divinity woven together. For the Aztecs, language was equally divine. They spoke Nahuatl, a tongue as poetic as it was powerful, filled with metaphors drawn from nature. Words were chosen with reverence, and to speak poorly was seen as an insult to the gods. Nahuatl gave us terms that still survive today: chocolate zocolatl, tomato, and avocado. But language was also the key to empire. Through Nahuatl, decrees were sent across conquered lands, tribute was demanded, and rituals were commanded. In their libraries, Amoxically, the Aztecs recorded knowledge on codices, folded books made of bark and deerskin, painted with vivid scenes of gods, battles, and ceremonies. When the Spanish arrived, they burned most of these codices, erasing countless stories forever. And yet, fragments remain, enough to glimpse a world where words were magic. And memory was carved in color and fire. At the heart of both civilizations lay an unshakable belief in sacred cycles. Time itself was a living force, a pattern of creation, destruction, and rebirth. The Maya tracked these cycles with astonishing precision through their long count calendar, predicting celestial events thousands of years into the future. To them, every day carried spiritual meaning. Every moment was connected to the gods. The Aztecs shared this cosmic vision, but added an even darker twist. They believed the world had already been created and destroyed 4 times, and they were living in the 5th sun, a fragile age sustained only by human blood. Without sacrifice, the sun would die, and with it, all life. This belief shaped every aspect of Aztec culture, from politics to warfare, turning their empire into a vast machine built to feed the gods. Myth and reality blurred within these sacred stories. In the Popol Vuh, the hero twins, Hunub, and Xbalanque descend into the underworld to defeat the Lords of Death, becoming the sun and the moon in their triumph. For the Maya, such tales explained not only the origin of life, but the eternal dance of light and shadow across the heavens. The Aztecs, too, wove grand narratives around their gods. Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, was said to have been born fully armed, slaying his sister Coyolxauhqui, goddess of the moon, in a cosmic battle that played out every dawn and dusk. To witness sunrise was, for the Aztecs, to witness this divine struggle renewed each day, a reminder that existence itself was a gift wrestled from chaos. Yet these myths were not distant tales. They shaped how people lived, fought, and died. Farmers planted their maize according to sacred calendars, aligning human labor with divine rhythms. Priests performed elaborate ceremonies to ensure the rains would fall and the seasons would turn. Warriors captured enemies not for conquest alone, but for offering their hearts to the sun, from birth to death. Every stage of life carried spiritual weight. The day a child was born determined their destiny, while the manner of one's death dictated their place in the afterlife. For the Maya and Aztecs alike, the gods were not silent observers but constant participants in the human story, demanding, generous, and eternal. And through language, myth, and ritual, these civilizations forged a worldview as sophisticated as it was haunting, where life and death were threads in the same divine tapestry, festivals of blood and fire. In the sacred plazas of Tenochtitlán, the air once trembled with the sound of drums, flutes, and conch shells. Thousands gathered beneath the towering Templo Mayor, where smoke from burning copal resins spiraled into the sky, carrying prayers to the gods. Music and dance were not mere entertainment. They were acts of devotion, woven into the fabric of existence itself. The Aztecs celebrated dozens of festivals aligned with the solar calendar and the sacred Tonel Pahuli, a 260-day cycle dictating the rhythm of life. During Panquetzalistli, honoring the war god Huitzilopochtli, warriors painted their bodies in brilliant hues, wearing feathered headdresses that caught the sunlight like fire. Songs praised the god's triumph over darkness, while dancers moved in hypnotic circles, their steps pounding like the heartbeat of the earth. These festivals transformed entire cities into living theaters of faith, where myth became reality and humans became vessels for divine power. For the Maya, ritual life was equally rich but carried its own mystical elegance. Deep within temple, calm plexes like Copan and Palenque, priest-kings performed ceremonies that mirrored the cycles of the cosmos. Music played on wooden drums and ocarinas echoed through the jungle, while torches illuminated carvings of gods and ancestors on stone walls. One of the most sacred Maya practices was bloodletting. Rulers and nobles pierced their tongues, ears, and even genitals with obsidian blades, offering their life essence to the gods. These acts were believed to open a portal between the mortal and divine realms, allowing rulers to commune directly with deities and ancestral spirits. Unlike the Aztecs, the Maya reserved human sacrifice for extraordinary occasions, such as the dedication of temples or the appeasement of powerful gods. But when it happened, it was no less dramatic. Captives were thrown into sacred cenotes, their souls believed to travel into the watery underworld of X. No ceremony defined the Aztec worldview more than human sacrifice, a practice both horrifying and awe-inspiring in scale. To the Aztecs, blood was the divine fuel that sustained the cosmos, the essence without which the sun would cease to rise and life itself would wither. During the dedication of the Templo Mayor in 1487, chronicles claim that as many as 20,000 captives were sacrificed over 4 days, their hearts lifted high to the sun while drums roared like thunder. Though Spanish accounts likely exaggerated these numbers, the psychological impact was undeniable. Ritual sacrifice was a performance of power. designed to terrify enemies and reaffirm the Aztecs' role as chosen guardians of the fifth sun. Warriors who died in battle or on the altar were believed to ascend to Tenochtitlán, the house of the sun, where they accompanied the sun god in his eternal journey across the sky, a promise that made death not an end, but glory eternal. These grand ceremonies blended religion, art, and politics into a single, breathtaking spectacle. Elaborate costumes transformed priests into living embodiments of gods, their bodies painted in vibrant blues, reds, and blacks. Feathered cloaks from the rarest quetzal birds shimmered like emerald flames, while gold ornaments reflected the divine radiance of the sun. In both Maya and Aztec rituals, fire played a sacred role. Flames consumed offerings, carrying them to the heavens, while smoke curled upward as a bridge between worlds. The scent of copal incense, sweet and resinous, hung heavy in the air, mingling with the cries of drums and the chants of thousands. These were moments when the line between mortal and divine blurred, when entire cities surrendered themselves to something greater, something eternal. But these rituals were not only for gods, they were also for people. Festivals provided a shared identity, uniting peasants, warriors, nobles, and priests in a single act of devotion. They were celebrations of cosmic harmony, reminders that humans were threads in a vast and intricate web. For the Maya, the ballgame pits carried similar meaning. Played on stone courts beneath towering walls, it was more than sport. It was a sacred drama representing the eternal battle between life and death, sun and shadow. In some games, the stakes were fatal. Captives or even champions were sacrificed to honor the gods. Yet, paradoxically, this sacrifice was seen as a gift, a transformation from mortal to divine. Through music, dance, sport, and ceremony, the Maya and Aztecs expressed a worldview in which every action resonated through the cosmos, where life itself was performance and death was transcendence. Life, art, and wonders of stone. To understand the Maya and Aztecs, we must step into their kitchens, their homes, their marketplaces to breathe the scents and taste the flavors that sustain their empires. At the heart of their world stood a single gift from the gods: maize. More than food, maize was life itself. Ground into flour for tortillas and tamales, boiled into rich stews, or fermented into sacred drinks, maize shaped every meal and every ritual. Alongside it came beans, squash, chili peppers, and a bounty of tropical fruits: papayas, guavas, pineapples, cacao pods bursting with bitter sweetness. The Aztecs, in particular, transformed cacao into a divine beverage called xocolotl, a frothy mixture of cacao, chili, and honey, served in golden goblets to emperors and warriors alike. To sip it was to taste the essence of power. Markets like Tlaloco and Tenochtitlan buzzed with traders carrying obsidian blades, woven textiles, jade ornaments, and exotic delicacies from distant lands. Spanish chroniclers stood awestruck, describing a world where thousands of voices rose like a symphony, where luxury and survival intertwined beneath the shadow of the pyramids. But beyond food, both civilizations cultivated a rich tapestry of art, literature, and storytelling that revealed the depths of their imagination. The Maya etched entire histories into steely, towering stone monuments carved with hieroglyphs recounting battles, kings, and sacred rituals. In painted codices, they recorded celestial alignments, divine myths, and sacred calendars with dazzling precision. Their murals, such as those at Bonham Pack, explode with color, depicting warriors, musicians, and gods locked in eternal narratives. The Aztecs, too, celebrated life and death through poetry and song. In Nahuatl, they composed verses known as flower songs, delicate meditations on mortality and beauty. We only borrow this earth. Our hearts are flowers that wither in the sun. These words survive even after their temples fell, revealing a culture deeply aware of the fragility of existence and the fleeting nature of human glory. Their art extended far beyond words and paint. It lived in craftsmanship and material beauty. The Maya were master sculptors, shaping limestone into intricately adorned temples and masks inlaid with jade and turquoise. The Aztecs, renowned goldsmiths, forged dazzling ornaments from precious metals, feathers and shells, creations so refined that when the Spanish first saw them, they believed no mortal hand could have shaped such perfection. Among their most extraordinary works were feather mosaics, where the shimmering plumage of quetzals, hummingbirds, and parrots formed living tapestries of color.
Amaze.
Masterpieces were not merely decorations.
Case.
They were offerings to the gods, manifestations of devotion in material form. To wear such art was to embody divine power itself, transforming rulers into symbols of cosmic authority. Yet perhaps their most astonishing achievements rose not from gold or feathers, but from stone. The Maya and Aztecs were architects of impossible visions, their cities engineered to mirror the heavens. Chichen Itza's Pyramid of Kukwe is a cosmic calendar carved in limestone. Its 365 steps embodying the solar year, its serpent's shadow descending perfectly during the equinox. The Aztec Templo Mayor, rising at the heart of Tenochtitlan, embodied the duality of life, one half dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, the other to Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility. These structures were not just temples. They were cosmic machines, designed to align the mortal world with the divine. Across jungles and highlands, vast networks of roads, canals, and aqueducts bound their empires together, carrying water, goods, and armies with breathtaking efficiency. Without iron tools, wheels, or beasts of burden, they carved civilizations that defied the limits of imagination. In every stone carving, every poem, every sip of bitter cacao, we glimpse the essence of Maya and Aztec life, a world where the sacred and the mundane intertwined seamlessly. These civilizations did not separate the divine from the human. To plant maize was to honor the gods. To carve jade was to shape eternity. To compose poetry was to speak directly to creation itself. Yet, beneath this beauty lay a fragile truth. All that splendor stood on the edge of an abyss. The drums of war thundered, the omens of doom whispered, and across the horizon, sails had already appeared. But before conquest and collapse, before steel and smallpox, the Maya and Aztecs lived as if each act, each festival, each word, each offering carried cosmic weight. To walk through their world is to walk through a universe alive with meaning, where every shadow hides a god and every breath echoes eternity. Economy, seeds of civilization. Long before the clash of empires, the economic foundations of the Maya and Aztecs were rooted in agriculture, the rhythm of planting, harvest, and survival. The gift of the gods was maize, and around it, entire societies were built. In the lowlands of the Yucatan, the Maya mastered milpa farming, a system where maize, beans, and squash grew together in harmony, replenishing the soil and sustaining generations. On limestone ridges and rainforest clearings, they carved terraces and irrigation channels, coaxing life from unforgiving terrain. For the Aztecs, innovation blossomed on water. In the shallow lakes surrounding Tenochtitlan, they engineered chinampas, floating gardens crafted from mud, reeds, and willow trees. These artificial islands were so fertile that they yielded multiple harvests a year, feeding a city of over 200,000 people. Without beasts of burden, metal plows, or wheels, both civilizations transformed their landscapes into living engines of abundance, proving that ingenuity, not technology, sustains empires. From fertile fields to bustling markets, the economy flowed like the rivers and canals that bound their worlds together. The Maya created extensive trade networks linking distant city-states across southern Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and Belize. Obsidian from the highlands, jade from the Motagua River, cacao from Chiapas, and feathers from the tropical forests moved along these routes like veins carrying the lifeblood of civilization. For the Aztecs, trade reached its pinnacle in the vast markets of Tlatelolco, the beating heart of commerce in Tenochtitlan. Spanish chroniclers stood awestruck at its scale. 60,000 people gathering daily to exchange cotton textiles, cacao beans, gold ornaments, ceramics, salt, honey, spices, and live animals. Organized with astonishing precision, these markets operated under strict laws and were overseen by appointed judges who ensured fairness. In a world without coins, cacao beans and cotton cloth served as currency. Proof that wealth could be cultivated as easily as it could be mined. Beyond local trade, both civilizations reached outward, forging long-distance exchange networks that connected them to regions hundreds of miles away. Maya merchants paddled canoes along coastal routes, carrying salt, obsidian, and jade to distant settlements. Meanwhile, Aztec Pachteca, elite merchant spies traveled secretly across enemy lands, gathering intelligence even as they traded goods. These traders were more than economic agents. They were ambassadors of empire, weaving connections that expanded influence and control. The tribute system, especially under the Aztecs, turned conquered cities into economic tributaries. Gold, turquoise, jaguar skins, cacao, and captives flowed into Tenochtitlan as symbols of submission. Wealth and power became inseparable, and tribute served not only to enrich the empire, but to remind the conquered of their place beneath the Mexica sun. Resource management was no less remarkable. The Maya, dwelling in regions prone to drought, developed complex systems of reservoirs, aqueducts, and underground cisterns called cholchins to store water during dry seasons. In the Valley of Mexico, the Aztecs mastered hydraulic engineering on an unprecedented scale. They constructed the Albarradón de Nezahualcóyotl, an enormous dike separating fresh water from salt water in Lake Texcoco, ensuring a steady supply for drinking and farming. Aqueducts carried pristine water into Tenochtitlan from springs miles away, cascading into fountains and feeding baths within the city. These innovations reveal a profound understanding of the environment, a partnership with nature, forged not through domination but adaptation. To walk among these ruins today is to witness civilizations that thrived in balance with their world, bending rivers, carving terraces, and sculpting floating gardens from mud and reeds. Yet the seeds of prosperity carried within them the shadows of vulnerability. For the Maya, the strain of overpopulation, prolonged drought, and resource exhaustion may have contributed to the collapse of many great city-states. For the Aztecs, wealth bred resentment. The tribute system, while enriching Tenochtitlan burdened subjugated peoples and planted the seeds of rebellion, a weakness that the Spanish would exploit. Beneath the grandeur of marketplaces and gardens lay a fragile balance, one that could be shattered by war, famine, or foreign conquest. Still, for centuries, the Maya and Aztecs stood as masters of their environments, sustaining millions through ingenuity and trade. Their economies were not just systems of survival, but reflections of their cosmology, cycles of growth, exchange, and renewal, bound to the very heartbeat of the gods themselves. Tribute, power, and the price of empire. At the heart of the Aztec Empire's economic machine lay the tribute system, a vast network of obligation and control that stretched across central Mexico. After each conquest, the defeated city-states, known as Altpetl, were absorbed into an intricate web of tribute agreements. Every month, caravans carried mountains of goods to the imperial capital of Tenochtitlan: bales of cotton, sacks of cacao beans, obsidian blades, precious turquoise, jaguar pelts, rubber, salt, honey, chilies, and live exotic animals destined for the royal zoo of Moctezuma II. Spanish chroniclers recorded these deliveries with awe and horror. They described rooms overflowing with shimmering gold and turquoise, storerooms stacked to the ceiling with textiles and food, and cages filled with eagles, jaguars, and serpents. But tribute was more than payment, was political submission, a reminder of who ruled and who obeyed. Failure to comply invited swift retribution, often delivered by the fearsome Aztec jaguar and eagle warriors. This flow of wealth fueled the imperial elite. At the top stood the Huey Tlatoani, the emperor, regarded as the living embodiment of the god's will. Beneath him were the nobility or pipiltin, who governed provinces, commanded armies, and lived in lavish palaces adorned with feather mosaics and gold. Below them were the Mkawiltin, the commoners who farmed, crafted, and served in the military. While at the very base were the Tlacatin, enslaved individuals who could be bought, sold, or sacrificed. For the Maya, the hierarchy was less centralized but no less rigid. Each city-state revolved around its Kaoa, the sacred king whose divine authority justified taxation and labor tribute. Wealth flowed upward, funding monumental architecture, grand ceremonies, and wars that perpetuated the cycle. This stark inequality between the ruling elite and the laboring masses was sustained not only by military might, but by religion itself, for tribute was framed as an offering to the gods, making compliance an act of cosmic duty. Markets became the beating heart of this economic power. In Tlatelolco, the grand market of the Aztec world, tens of thousands gathered daily beneath the shadow of pyramids, their voices merging into a living ocean of trade. Witnesses describe stalls brimming with jade necklaces, obsidian knives, embroidered tunics, baskets of maize, cacao drinks, and sacred incense. Every item had its place, every price its standard, and judges patrolled the stalls to ensure fairness and order. For the Maya, bustling trade centers like Calakmul and Uxmal connected inland cities with coastal ports, where canoes laden with salt, fish, and cotton ferried goods across turquoise waters. Trade was not merely economic, was cultural exchange, spreading ideas, beliefs, and technologies across Mesoamerica. Through markets, the Maya and Aztecs maintained their cosmopolitan worlds, drawing together people from distant regions into a shared economic rhythm. But wealth was inseparable from warfare. Among the Aztecs, conquest served not only to expand territory, but to secure tribute and captives. Campaigns were meticulously planned to bring New Alpetal under control, and successful generals earned both status and land. The famed flower. Wars ritualized battles fought with neighboring states like Tlaxcala were designed less to claim territory and more to capture warriors for sacrifice. These captives fed the religious engine of empire while reinforcing economic dominance. For the Maya, rival city-states waged endless wars to control trade routes and resources. Obsidian quarries, jade mines, and cacao plantations became as strategically vital as sacred temples. Wealth and blood became entwined, each conquest fueling both prosperity and cosmic obligation. In this fusion of economics, religion, and power, every battle reshaped the balance of Mesoamerica, setting the stage for centuries of rivalry and eventual vulnerability. Yet beneath the glittering facade of abundance, cracks began to form. By the early 16th century, resentment brewed among subjugated peoples, especially those crushed under the weight of Aztec tribute demands. Entire provinces bore crippling obligations, surrendering vast portions of their harvests, textiles, and labor. The empire's insatiable hunger for goods and captives turned once loyal allies into silent enemies. When the Spanish arrived in 1519, they found willing partners among the Tlaxcalans, Totonacs, and others eager to escape Aztec dominance. The economic brilliance of the empire, its organized tribute systems, centralized markets, and intricate trade networks had inadvertently sown the seeds of its downfall. In their pursuit of wealth and power, the Aztecs built an empire too vast to control and too oppressive to sustain. The stage was set for the collision of worlds, where gold would meet steel and where economies built over centuries would be appended in a single, devastating generation. Gold, conquest, and the cost of empire. When Hernán Cortés first set foot on the shores of Veracruz in 1519, he entered a world whose economic heart had beaten steadily for centuries. Beneath the pyramids and temples, a complex system of trade routes, tribute flows, markets, and agricultural networks sustained millions. But the Spanish came not to trade. They came for gold, glory, and God. Guided by rumors of unimaginable wealth in the heart of the Aztec Empire, Cortés forged alliances with resentful tributary states like Tlaxcala and Tenochtitlan, transforming old enemies of the Aztecs into eager collaborators. Together, they marched toward Tenochtitlan, the jewel of Mesoamerica, where the markets of Tlatelolco overflowed with goods and the imperial palaces glittered with treasures. To the Spanish, these riches were not sacred offerings or symbols of cosmic power. They were currency, fuel for an empire hungry for dominance. What followed was not simply conquest, but economic annihilation. The fall of Tenochtitlan in 1521 marked the collapse of a world. Once the beating heart of trade and tribute, the city became a smoldering ruin. Spanish forces dismantled the Templo Mayor, stripped gold from its altars, and drained the empire's treasuries. The tribute economy that had once sustained the Aztec elite was dismantled overnight. In its place, the Spanish imposed the encomienda system, a feudal model that granted Spanish settlers control over land and the indigenous labor force. Vast tracts of farmland, once collectively managed, were handed to conquistadors, while indigenous peoples were forced into servitude, cultivating wheat, sugarcane, and European crops unfamiliar to their ancestors. The Aztec system of markets and localized trade collapsed under new restrictions, replaced by an extractive economy designed to funnel wealth directly to Spain. For the Maya city-states further south, resistance was fiercer and lasted longer. But their trade networks, too, were steadily strangled. Their autonomy eroded under Spanish rule. The obsession with precious metals reshaped not only Mesoamerica, but the entire world. The Spanish quickly redirected labor toward the extraction of gold and silver, sending vast shipments across the Atlantic to fuel the growing power of the Spanish crown. Mines like those at Zacatecas and Taxco became economic engines, producing tons of silver that flooded European markets. Indigenous populations, already ravaged by smallpox and measles, were forced into brutal conditions in the mines under the repartimento system, where many perished from exhaustion and disease. Cacao, once a sacred currency of the Aztecs, became a colonial commodity shipped to Europe, transformed from divine nectar into a luxury for aristocrats. The ancient balance of maize, cacao, feathers, and jade gave way to a transatlantic economy dominated by silver, sugar, and slaves. What had once been a network of vibrant local economies became a colony, trapped within the global machinery of empire. Yet the economic transformation was not just material, it was cultural and spiritual. Entire systems of value were rewritten, where Aztec wealth had been measured in cacao, cotton, and cosmic prestige. The Spanish imposed a monetary economy based on European coins. Lands once sacred to the gods were parceled into estates, and water systems that had nourished Tenochtitlan's chinampas were abandoned or destroyed, leading to flooding and famine. The Maya fared little better, though their dispersed cities allowed them to resist longer. Spanish colonial authorities eventually seized control of key cacao plantations and jade trade routes. Forced conversion to Christianity further integrated indigenous peoples into a European worldview, where economic productivity and spiritual salvation were tightly bound. Entire generations grew up under a system where labor served empire, not community, where wealth no longer built temples but lined the coffers of kings an ocean away. By the late 16th century, the ancient economies of the Maya and Aztecs had been irreversibly transformed. The grandeur of Tlatelolco's markets, the brilliance of Aztec tribute flows, the Maya jade roots and cacao empires all lay in ruins or repurposed under colonial demands. The influx of silver from Mexico into Europe fueled the rise of global capitalism, enriching Spain but draining Mesoamerica of its autonomy and resources. For the indigenous peoples, the cost was incalculable: population collapse from disease, loss of ancestral lands, and the dismantling of a worldview where economy, religion, and nature had once existed in harmony. Yet, despite centuries of exploitation, fragments of the old world survived. The resilience of maize farming, the persistence of traditional crafts, and the enduring reverence for cacao whispered of civilizations that refused to vanish entirely. Beneath the colonial veneer, the economic heartbeat of Mesoamerica continued, quieter but unbroken. Current situation, from empire to nation. The fall of Tenochtitlan in 1521 marked the death of an empire, but it also planted the seeds of a nation. For 3 centuries, New Spain existed under the iron grip of the Spanish crown. The once thriving tribute systems of the Aztecs and Maya were replaced by colonial rule, where viceroys governed vast territories stretching from California to Central America. But beneath this colonial facade, indigenous identity endured. In the villages and highlands, Maya farmers still sowed maize according to ancient calendars. Nahuatl poets still whispered verses in secret, and local festivals preserved fragments of forgotten gods beneath Christian names. Over time, resentment simmered among indigenous peoples, enslaved Africans and mestizos, the mixed descendants of Spaniards and natives. By the early 19th century, winds of revolution swept across Latin America. And in 1810, Father Miguel Hidalgo's famous Grito de Dolores ignited a war that would reshape the continent. After 11 years of bloody struggle, Mexico gained independence in 1821, but freedom came with chaos. The new nation inherited a fractured society, deep divisions between indigenous communities, mestizos, and European elites, alongside a crumbling economy drained by centuries of colonial extraction. The Maya and other indigenous groups, long marginalized, were left largely outside the new power structures. In 1847, the caste war of Yucatan erupted, as Maya rebels rose against oppressive taxation, forced labor, and systemic discrimination. For decades, they fought fiercely to reclaim their lands and dignity, carving out autonomous regions deep within the jungle. Meanwhile, the Mexican government faced external threats, losing vast territories, including Texas, California, and much of the Southwest, to the United States in the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848. Mexico, once the heart of a mighty empire, had become a wounded nation struggling to define itself amid constant upheaval. By the late 19th century, Mexico came under the rule of Porfirio Diaz, whose regime, known as the Porfiriato, lasted more than 3 decades. Diaz sought to modernize Mexico's economy, attracting foreign investment and expanding railroads, mines, and industries. Yet this rapid development came at a heavy cost. While urban elites grew wealthy, indigenous peasants and rural workers were pushed off ancestral lands, forced into labor on haciendas and plantations. For the Maya of Yucatan, this era was marked by forced labor in henequan plantations, where they toiled under brutal conditions producing the green gold that fueled Mexico's exports. Beneath the surface of modernization, anger festered. Inequality deepened, and the voices of the marginalized grew louder, calling for land, dignity, and justice. The tension would soon erupt into one of the most defining moments in Mexican history, a revolution that would shake the foundations of power. On 1910, the Mexican Revolution began, a decade-long conflict that transformed the nation. Led by figures like Emiliano Zapata, Pancho Villa, and Francisco Madero, the revolution sought to dismantle the entrenched systems of inequality and return land to the people. Zapata's famous cry, "Tierra y Libertad, land and liberty," echoed the ancient struggle of the Maya and Aztecs, whose economies had once been rooted in communal ownership of land. While the revolution succeeded in toppling Diaz and redistributing land, its aftermath was complex and bloody. New power struggles emerged, and entire regions were devastated. Yet out of the chaos came the Constitution of 1917, one of the most progressive of its time, enshrining rights to education, labor protections, and land reform. For the first time, Mexico began to rebuild not just as a former colony, but as a nation striving to balance modernity with indigenous heritage. The 20th century saw Mexico navigating a precarious path between tradition and transformation. The ruling Institutional Revolutionary Party PRI consolidated power for most of the century, overseeing periods of growth but also corruption and authoritarianism. Yet beneath political maneuvering, the soul of Mexico endured. In Maya villages and Aztec-descended towns, ancient languages continued to be spoken. Festivals honoring pre-Hispanic deities persisted under Catholic names, and pyramids stood as silent witnesses to an unbroken lineage. Today, more than 68 indigenous languages are still spoken across Mexico, each a thread tying modern identity to ancient roots. The echoes of the Aztec, Tlatoani, and Maya Aja live on, not in empires of stone, but in the rhythms of daily life. Mexico's political history is one of loss and resilience, of a people repeatedly conquered yet never erased, the soul that never died. In modern Mexico, the ghosts of the Aztecs and Maya are never far away. Their pyramids still rise beneath the blazing sun, their gods still whisper through sacred symbols, and their festivals carry echoes of cosmic beliefs older than time itself. Every November, as the veil between life and death thins, Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, paints Mexico in marigold and memory. Families build altars, placing photographs, candles, sugar skulls, and offerings of food for ancestors. Returning from the underworld, few realize that this vibrant celebration blends Aztec rituals honoring Mictlantecuhtli, the Lady of Death, with Catholic traditions brought by the Spanish. It is a living testament to cultural survival, where conquest could not erase belief, and where memory became resistance. In the winding streets of Oaxaca, Chiapas, and Michoacan, this festival is more than a ritual. It is an act of defiance, a declaration that Mexico remembers. Cuisine, too, carries the ancient heartbeat of Mesoamerica. In bustling markets and family kitchens, the sacred trinity of maize, beans, and squash, the foundation of the Aztec and Maya diet, still defines Mexican cooking. From the soft warmth of handmade tortillas to steaming pots of tamales, from earthy mole sauces blending chocolate and chili to pozole, a pre-Hispanic ceremonial stew once reserved for warriors, every dish tells a story of resilience and fusion. Cacao, once the divine drink of Aztec emperors, has become chocolate, a gift Mexico shared with the world. Even pulque, the fermented maguey beverage once consumed in sacred rituals, still flows in rustic bars, bridging past and present. Spanish influences added pork, beef, and dairy. But the soul of Mexican cuisine remains indigenous, its flavors rooted in ancient soil. To taste Mexico is to taste the eternal dialogue between civilizations layered across centuries, like spices in a single, unforgettable dish. Mexico's music, dance, and art also pulse with ancestral energy. The haunting rhythms of mariachi and The passionate strumming of jarana guitars carry echoes of indigenous melodies, blending with Spanish harmonies to create something uniquely Mexican. The iconic Danza de los Voladores, the dance of the flyers, still unfolds in sacred ceremonies, where four men spiral from a towering pole, symbolizing the connection between earth and sky, life and death. In visual art, Diego Rivera's murals immortalize the struggles of indigenous peoples, while Frida Kahlo's paintings weave ancient symbols into expressions of identity and pain. Beyond galleries and stages, this creative spirit thrives in everyday life. On the vibrant alabrages carved in Oaxaca, on the colorful jical yarn paintings, and in the woven textiles of Maya villages. Every brushstroke, song, and dance carries a truth. Mexico's culture is not a relic, it is alive, evolving, and unconquered. Even in language, the echoes of the past endure. Words from Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs, flow effortlessly through modern Spanish: chocolate tomate, cacao, aguacate, mezcal, and quetzal. In the South, millions still speak Maya dialects, preserving a direct link to one of the world's most sophisticated ancient civilizations. Over 68 indigenous languages are recognized in Mexico today, each one a living archive of philosophy, astronomy, and poetry. But this linguistic richness faces challenges. Globalization and urban migration have eroded traditional practices, and many indigenous tongues risk fading into silence. Wrote. Yet movements to revive and protect ancestral languages are growing, supported by artists, educators, and communities determined to reclaim their heritage. To speak these words is to resist oblivion, to keep alive a worldview where humans, gods, and nature share a single breath. Mexico's culture has transcended borders, captivating the world while holding fast to its roots. Lucha Libre, wrestling, colorful piñatas, and the cinematic masterpieces of directors like Guillermo del Toro and Alfonso Cuarón reflect a creativity born from centuries of struggle and synthesis. Global celebrations of Dia de los Muertos now appear from Los Angeles to Tokyo, carrying with them the philosophy that death is not an end, but a passage. UNESCO has declared much of Mexico's cuisine and festivals intangible cultural heritage, recognizing their unmatched value to humanity. Yet, at its core, Mexican culture remains deeply local, woven from countless microcosms: Maya rituals in Chiapas, jical beadwork in Nayarit, Purépecha dances in Michoacán. In this mosaic of identities, the legacies of the Maya and Aztecs are not distant memories. They are threads binding a living, breathing nation. Through art, food, music, and ritual, Mexico tells the world, we remember who we are. Between shadows and horizons, Mexico today stands at a crossroads, a nation forged in fire, shaped by ancient empires, scarred by conquest, yet driven by resilience. Its economy, the second largest in Latin America, is a complex tapestry of contrasts. On one hand, Mexico is a global powerhouse, a top oil producer, a hub for automotive and electronics manufacturing, and a vital player in North American trade through agreements like USMCA. Its agricultural roots run deep, stretching back to the Maya's maize fields and the Aztecs' floating gardens, now powering billion-dollar exports of avocados, coffee, and tequila. Tourism thrives as millions flock to see Chichén Itzá, Teotihuacan, and Cancunas beaches, drawn by the echoes of lost civilizations. Yet beneath this progress lies another story, one of inequality. While skyscrapers rise in Mexico City, millions in rural Chiapas, Oaxaca, and Guerrero still live in poverty, disconnected from the wealth flowing through global markets. Mexico's economy, like its history, exists in layers, ancient and modern, opulent and broken. But Mexico's challenges are not just economic, they are deeply political and social. The war on drugs, which erupted in the mid-2000s, has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, reshaping entire regions and communities. powerful cartels control smuggling routes, fueling cycles of violence that stretch from rural villages to international borders. In many places, local governments struggle against corruption, leaving citizens trapped between state authority and cartel power. And yet, amidst this turbulence, voices of resistance rise. Grassroots movements demand justice for the disappeared. Environmental activists fight against land exploitation, and indigenous groups reclaim their territories and traditions. These struggles are not new. They echo the resistance of the Aztecs against courts, the Maya rebellions against Spanish rule, and the revolutionaries of 1910. The fight for sovereignty, identity, and dignity continues. A reminder that Mexico's story is still being written, and its wounds are both historical and present. On the world stage, Mexico walks a delicate path between tradition and globalization. As part of the G20, it wields influence far beyond its borders, shaping discussions on climate change, trade, and migration. Its diaspora, over 37 million Mexican Americans, makes Mexico a cultural superpower across North America, embedding its music, food, and festivals into global consciousness. Films like Roma and Pan's Labyrinth, artists like Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, and culinary icons like Mole Poblano and Tacos al Pastor have carried Mexico's identity to the farthest corners of the earth. Yet globalization also brings tension. Foreign corporations exploit natural resources, traditional crafts compete with mass production, and indigenous voices struggle to be heard in the noise of modernity. Mexico stands between two worlds, the ancient and the modern, the local and the global, striving to honor its roots while claiming its place among rising powers. And through it all, the spirits of the Maya and Aztecs remain. In the ruins of Palenque and Tenochtitlan, their stories whisper to those willing to listen. Tales of empires that rose and fell, of sacrifices made to gods, of cosmic calendars that measured time in cycles rather than lines. Perhaps Mexico's modern struggles mirror these ancient patterns, a cycle of creation and destruction, conquest and rebirth. Like the Aztec sun, said to die and rise again, Mexico too has endured collapse and risen stronger each time. From the ashes of empire, from colonial chains, from revolutions and rebellions, this nation has repeatedly reinvented itself. Its resilience is not accidental. It is ancestral, carved into its very identity. To understand modern Mexico is to understand that the past is never truly past. It is alive beneath the skin of the present, guiding, haunting, and inspiring the path forward. As Mexico faces the future, it carries both burdens and blessings. Climate change threatens its coastlines, political unrest tests its democracy, and economic disparity challenges its unity. Yet there is also hope in the vibrant creativity of its youth, in grassroots movements reclaiming heritage, in scientific innovation, and in the rediscovery of ancestral wisdom. The pyramids of the Maya and Aztecs still stand, not just as monuments, but as reminders of human potential, of civilizations that gazed at the stars, mapped the cosmos, and dared to build eternity from stone. Mexico's journey is far from over. It is a nation of survivors, a fusion of worlds, a bridge between memory and possibility. And perhaps that is its greatest strength. In every festival, every dish, every prayer, every song, the heart of Mexico beats with a single truth: we have endured. We endure still. And we will endure again. The Maya. The Aztecs. The rise and fall of empires. And the heartbeat of Mexico that never stopped. This is just the beginning. Join us on Historic Horizon TV, where history isn't just told, it's reborn. Subscribe now. The past awaits you.